I already as Karen stated, my name is Chris Mendez, and I am the Associate Director of Research Compliance and the University's Export Control Officer. And I'm just going to start off and give you guys a brief overview of export controls. And before I start, I like to get a feel of how familiar you guys are. By chance, have any of you heard of the term export controls? If you have, you can raise your hand, you can put a reaction button. So I see that some of you have. And so if you are familiar, then it'll kind of be either a refresher for you, or it'll be an introduction for new information for you. Okay, so I want to start off by giving you guys a definition of what exactly export control laws are. So they are export control regulations are U.S. laws that control the unlicensed export of certain technologies, equipment, hardware, and software, or information for reasons of national security or protection of trade. And payments and services to listed individuals, entities, and comprehensively sanctioned countries are also regulated under these laws. So pretty much there are laws that either permit you to share certain information, certain software, certain equipment, as well as provide services and payment to certain individuals. So I'll go through next what exactly those regulations are. So there are 3 regulating bodies for export controls. There are other regulations that touch on export controls, but these are the 3 main ones that we look at whenever we're determining whether or not an export control license is required. So we always start off with the Department of State, and they regulate under the International Traffic in Arms Regulations, also known as the ITAR. So I will use that term, so remember, ITAR, International Traffic in Arms. And they are the individuals that are pretty much anything with defense services related or military application is more than likely going to be governed under the Department of State. So we always, whenever we're looking at anything, we always start off to see if it falls under the Department of State. Got it? And then next we have the Department of Commerce, and they regulate under the Export Administration Regulations, also known as EAR or EAR. And typically dual use items would fall under the Department of Commerce. So once you've reviewed the Department of State and it's not there, then you'll always go to the Department of Commerce. And if it's not there, then you'll go ahead and move on to the next, which is the Department of Treasury. And they are regulated under the Office of Foreign Assets Control, also known as OFAC. And pretty much payments and services to listed entities, you would find that information here. So always remember the 3 governing bodies are Department of State, ITAR, Department of Commerce, EAR, and the Department of Treasury, OFAC. So those are all of the regulations we check once we have identified either a person or a potential project that we're doing that could potentially fall under export control. And I forgot to say this at the beginning. If you have any questions during the presentation, please include those into the chat box so that we can get to it at the end with the question and answer section. Okay, and so restrictions on export depend on 3 things. And anytime, like I said, anytime we are notified of anything regarding export controls, we always look at the who, the what, and the where. And when I say who, what do I mean? I mean who. Who is the recipient of the export? Who will you be sharing the information with? Who will you be providing the piece of equipment to? Those are the things that we look at because it all will determine whether or not something is permissible. The next is the what. And what is it? The nature of the item of the export. What exactly is the item? As well as how will the recipient of the export use it? So sometimes there may be items, like let's say I have a pen. And this pen may not be export controlled. However, by providing this pen to a person from the Iranian military, that could be considered an export and a license could be needed for said item. So we always have to look at the what. What is the nature of the item as well as what are you going to do with it? Will it have any military application? Those things always will determine whether or not export controls are associated with it. And next, where exactly are you taking it? What is the destination of export? If you are traveling, if you are shipping, this is where this will come into play. The where and the who can sometimes go together, because the person, where is this person located? Because that can potentially determine whether or not export control license is needed. So always remember, anytime we're reviewing export controls, we look at the who, the what, and the where, because they all will potentially affect whether or not a license is needed when you're talking about export controls. Okay, and then here are some of the risk areas. Of course, it's not comprehensive, so of course there's always risks outside of what I'm mentioning. However, these are the ones that I feel like should be touched on the majority of the time because they're the most commonly seen exports. So you have hiring of non-U.S. persons, international travel, international collaboration, purchasing from international vendors, which a lot of people never think about because they'll think, oh, I'm just purchasing something small like a piano. But if it's from an international vendor, you have to ensure that, again, OFAC is not going to play a part in can you actually purchase from this person. Research and military application. Deemed exports. If someone's here, will you share something here on Prairie View's campus? We'll talk about that a little later. International shipping and any activities planned with embargoed countries. These embargoed countries, they change pretty frequently, or not really frequently, but sometimes they do change. So currently the embargoed countries are Russia, Iran, Sudan, North Korea, Syria, and Cuba. So if you plan to do any work with either of these countries, 9 times out of 10, it will probably not be approved for a license, because a license would definitely more than likely be needed to do something for them. So I mentioned hiring of non-U.S. persons in the previous slide. So exactly who would be considered a non-U.S. person? So a person who is not a citizen of the United States, not a permanent resident, and not protected by the U.S. government as a political refugee or political asylum, those individuals, if you do not fall under one of these categories, you would be considered a non-U.S. person in regards to export controls. So, and who can these be? It can be a student, it can be a faculty staff member, a visitor, or collaborator. And when you're talking about students and faculty and staff, that's where the hiring comes into play. If you have an export control project and you have a student that you would like to hire to work on that project, if they are a non-U.S. person, it's possible that a license will be needed for the person to work on the project, depending on the country of origin. So that is something that you have to take in consideration, and the same for faculty and staff. If you plan to collaborate with one of your colleagues, and they are a non-U.S. person, you have to ensure that a license is not required for that person to work on that project. Or if you want to hire someone, which we do have people who we hire non-U.S. persons for different positions, we have to ensure that if they are being hired, that we would not need a license for them to work on any projects they would work on, and they're not going to be in any positions in which they would either need a license for it, or they're not able to actually work on the project. So those are things we have to take in consideration. And visitors, same thing. If we're having international visitors, we have to have some type of document letting us know exactly who the person is, as well as what are they going to be doing here on campus. And again, the same for collaborators. If you're going to collaborate with someone, we have to be notified of who the collaborator is if they are a non-U.S. person. Again, not only providing them with a tangible item, but also sharing information. We've had people who they're collaborating with someone at another institution that is a non-U.S. institution, and they're not thinking, oh, I probably need to make sure that this is someone that I can collaborate with, because they're thinking, oh, we're just sharing information. All information is not okay to share with just anyone. So you have to make sure that prior to sharing information with non-U.S. persons, that you have that they've been vetted and we know for a fact that it is okay to work with those individuals. Okay, and then international travel. This is one that I think would probably touch more people because it is something that is done pretty frequently, especially if you are a researcher. So there's different reasons for traveling, and here is one of the top reasons that someone would travel, which is research collaboration. So when you're traveling internationally for research collaboration, you want to make sure that we look at the who and the what at this time. And when we're talking about the who, it is ensuring that the person or company you plan to collaborate with are not on denied entities list, as well as ensuring that any items you plan to travel with do not require a license to export. So when you're talking about ensuring the person is not on a denied entities list, you're saying if I am collaborating with someone or institution, let's check and make sure that these individuals are okay to work with. And then if you're planning to take something, you want to make sure that, again, before you hand carry, which is you take it with you and to the country, or ship, then we want to make sure that a license is not necessary for you to export the item. And then for information, we are going to have to look and see exactly what information are you going to be working on, because no, it wouldn't be considered an export per se because you would be in another country. But again, it's sharing information, so that can be looked at as an export as well. So we will look at those two things when you're talking about traveling for research or collaboration purposes. And then the top reason most people travel would definitely be for conferences or meetings. And again, we're looking at the who and the what here. And you want to ensure that the hosts of the conference or meeting, they're not on denied entities list, as well as ensure that the people you're presenting to are not on denied entities list, and ensuring that the information presented does not require a license to share. So again, when it comes to conferences, you think, oh, it's a conference, everyone can come. However, whoever's hosting that conference, you have to ensure that it is okay to do a monetary exchange with the conference host, whether it be a university, a company, or a person. Those that you have to check to make sure that it is okay, because again, monetary exchanges can be looked at as a violation of the export control regulation. So we have to make sure that we're looking at that. And if you're not going to be presenting at the conference or a meeting, or if you are going to be presenting at the conference or a meeting, we have to ensure that what you are presenting is okay to share, as well as who you're presenting it to, that it's okay to share it with them. So when you're going for a meeting, you should have a list of who you're going to be meeting with. So we can always check that. For conferences, it gets a little more tricky. So that is something we do have to look at, but especially for meetings, we have to know exactly who you're going to meet with. And again, for your information, if you have a funded project, you will know if the information that you're sharing, if it is potentially export control, because it would be a stipulation regarding sharing, publications and things like that. You'll have to get pre-approval. So that is something that the who and the what that you have to review when you're talking about international travel for these two particular purposes. Now, there are other reasons to travel internationally, and for those, we just want to ensure that the places we are traveling to are not sanctioned. Again, I mentioned those embargoed countries, but there are also other reasons why traveling to a certain country, you may need to be aware of some export control things that you can and cannot share, or can and cannot take. So that's what we would look at if you're going for something other than the other four that I just mentioned. And then always avoid traveling abroad without verifying that no violations of export control regulations are likely to occur. And that will go along with the next slide that I have for you guys. So when exactly is export control clearance and approval needed? That's a very common question that I have been asked, and here are a few of the times that you would need to make sure that you contact our office for clearance or approval. So there's traveling abroad, like I mentioned, international travel. Prior to you submitting your Concur request, you should go ahead and complete the international travel checklist, so that it can provide us with information regarding the actual trip. And it will give us the who, the what, and the where. So that is something that you should definitely do. I say prior because sometimes, depending on where you're going, as well as the reason for your travel, you may need the review time may be a little longer than the time that you have allotted for your Concur request. And I also have on there as a representative of PVAMU because, of course, we all travel, and sometimes we travel internationally. If you're not traveling on Prairie View A&M University's business, then honestly, we don't have to be notified unless you plan to take your Prairie View assigned laptop, computer, any devices, any information as far as like your data for your research. If you plan to take that or access that while you are away, then you want to go ahead and contact our office so that we can let you know if it's okay or if you should, if you need something encrypted, you know, anything like that. So that is something that you should definitely be aware of when it comes to traveling and collaborating with a non-U.S. person and company. Like I mentioned earlier, if you are going to collaborate with someone from a non-U.S. Country, then you want to go, from a non-U.S. Company or a non-U.S. person, then you want to ensure that you have notified us of who it is and what you guys will be collaborating on. And then inviting an international visitor on PVAMU's campus. Again, if you're going to have anyone come, whether it be for a seminar, to tour your research labs, all of that, we want to make sure that we're notified of it so that we can ensure that no person that should not have access to any potential data that is export controlled or information. We want to make sure that we're aware of that. So please contact us before you invite them here and before they're here on our campus. And then purchasing items from international vendors. Again, like I said, we have to make sure we're vetting our international vendors so that we can make sure that we are not violating any OFAC regulations. And then shipping items internationally, of course. If you're shipping, the moment that you know that you're shipping, please go ahead and contact our office. And then external employment and contracting by non-U.S. companies and universities. So this is actually one that's been in the news a lot. There's been quite a few individuals from different institutions, like there's been some at Baylor, some at U of H, that they've had external employment or they were contracting for non-U.S. companies, and they were either providing services to some of them were providing services to entities that were on denied entities list, and so there was a violation. And then also there was one NSF, National Science Foundation. They currently sent out a report, and they've had 16 to 20 cases involved with non-disclosures of affiliation with international companies. And that is something, again, we have to make sure we do, because in those cases, those individuals, their grants were suspended and the universities had to pay back the funds. So we want to make sure that if we have external employment or we're contracting with non-U.S. companies, then we want to make sure we're disclosing that information so that we are not in violation and we don't lose funding, because it can occur depending on what your grant is on. So how exactly do you get export control clearance? So for one, I always refer people to the Export Control Compliance Manual, because it does provide you with information regarding what are some of the policies and procedures here on Prairie View campus regarding export control. So that can always be your first line of reference. And then after that, you can always contact me as soon as you know that you have something or you're going to be doing something that potentially falls under export control regulations. And then please submit your necessary documents at least 2 weeks prior to the activity for clearance and approval. And I mentioned just a while ago, when you're shipping, please contact me as soon as you know, because sometimes getting licenses to ship can take quite some time. So we want to make sure that we have the necessary time set aside to obtain any licenses that's necessary for you to do whatever activities you have. And that is all that I have, and here is my contact information, and we can open it up for questions.
Great presentation, Ms. Mendez. We do have several questions in the chat box here. Let's see. The first one is, what type of license is required for a non-US person to work on a research project?
The type, well, it depends. It depends on what the reason for the, what is the reason for the license needed. Because so depending on what the reason for the export control is, it's going to determine whether you get a license from the Department of State, from the Department of Commerce, or from OFAC. So it really just depends on what the activity is that this person is going to be doing and who it falls under. But I will say that more than likely, if they are on a denied entities list with OFAC, you're probably not going to get a license. But yeah, so it just really depends on what the activity is for the control, which would determine which license is necessary, which would be either from the Department of State, Department of Commerce, or Department of Treasury.
Can you
answer the question?
Can you talk a little bit about what is a license?
Well, a license is approval. It's like an approval, just as if you were submitting for the IRB, for the Institutional Review Board, and you're doing an activity. And before you do that, you have to get IRB approval. That's what a license is. It's just another term for approval letter. And in the license, it'll tell you exactly what you're being approved to do, who's being approved to do it, as well as what time frame you have to do said activity.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question. How long in advance does the compliance office have to be notified before a compliance with a non-US person is done? So I'm assuming before an interaction with a non-US person is done. Well,
you, as soon as you know that you plan to do something with a non-US person or company, that would definitely be the best. But as far as time frames, like I mentioned, at least give us 2 weeks for review and approval, because like I said, sometimes depending on what exactly the activity is or who the person is, it could take longer. So as soon as you know, that would be the best thing, that we can get the process started. But but at least 2 weeks before you know that you're going to be doing something.
Okay, we've got a couple of other questions, but I'd like to remind everyone to please complete the brief survey that's in the chat box. Here's another question. Do these same rules apply if you want to present at an NGO meeting where persons from some of these countries may be present?
If you're presenting at a conference, and I'm pretty sure that's probably what you're saying, if you're presenting at a conference, what we typically do is we review who the host is, as well as who all is presenting, because sometimes you can get an idea who the presenters are. Of course, you can never know who all is going to be at the conference. However, if we can review what are the topics that are going to be discussed, who the host is, it can give you an idea of if it's okay for you to share that information. But typically, anything that you're sharing at a conference, it should be something that would be that would now fall under. It'll be open, so it wouldn't fall under needing a license per se.
Another question: what if I'm doing personal travel outside of the U.S. And I have my research information in the iCloud, and I'm taking my iPhone with me? Is that something that I need to connect with you about?
That's something you should, just because it's your research data. Like I said, again, that kind of goes with the what and the where. What exactly is your research? What data would you be accessing? And then also, where are you going? Because again, some countries, what your research topic is or what your data is, it may not be an issue, but it may be for another country. So it would just depend on the what and the where in that regard.
Okay, here's another question. How do faculty know if their project is actually an export controls project or not?
So a good rule of thumb to identify if your project is export controlled is, does it have military application? If it could be replicated and used to as a defense, then that's probably something that that's export controlled. A lot of if it's a grant funded project, then you would know because there would be stipulations in your grant regarding a good rule is if when it comes to sharing your data, if you have to get approval prior to that, it's probably something that would be export controlled. If anything dealing with international travel, international collaboration, doing something at an international in an international country, those are red flags, as well as a lot of DoD, Department of Defense, National Science Foundation, anything that is funded by the military. That's pretty much, you can almost guarantee that the information that you have or the project that you're going to be doing is going to more than likely be export controlled.
Okay, I want to remind everyone again to complete the brief survey that's in the chat. And I have another question for you. You mentioned several times OFAC. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So OFAC is the Office of Foreign Assets and Control, and like I said, for govern pretty much they're under the Department of Treasury, which would tell you it's kind of more so a monetary thing. So when you're talking about someone being on an entities list or on something like that, it's because it's usually they're telling you what you can and cannot share monetarily. Like, can you provide services? Because if you provide services, there's probably going to be a monetary exchange. Can you purchase something from a company? Again, a monetary exchange. So usually OFAC deals with money. Can you purchase? Can you get money from this company? Can there be any exchanges monetarily? So that's when you're talking about OFAC, that is the gist of what they cover.
Okay, and you also talked about denied entity. Can you speak more about that?
So denied entities are individuals or companies or institutions that are on a list because either they have done something that threatens our national security or other things. Like, there are people on denied entities for Medicaid fraud. So it just really depends. But for export control purpose, it is typically someone that has threatened our national security or a company.
Okay, another reminder to complete the survey, but here's another question for you, Ms. Mendez. When an external federal grant is awarded, will the Office of Sponsored Programs or the Office of Research Compliance or Export Controls Office confirm to the PI if the project is actually export controlled, or is it the PI's responsibility to check with their funding program manager?
So when your project is set up into Maestro before submission, you are responsible, the PI is responsible for identifying if there's a subset of questions regarding export controls. You are responsible for honestly and as thoroughly understanding answering the questions regarding export controls. Because once you answer those questions, your response prompts the system to contact me so that I am aware that this particular person has a project where they do said. So it's the responsibility of the PI, that's the first part, to accurately answer questions in Maestro. Secondly, once I've been notified, it is now my responsibility to contact you with any questions I may have. If for some reason you've responded to something and it's not really, it doesn't fall under export controls, I will clear it. You don't have to worry about it. Otherwise, I will contact you and I will ask questions about what you're going to do, who you're going to work with, so that we can make sure that we don't have any export control violations occur.
Great question and great answer. Are there any additional questions? Okay, Krista Mendez, thank you so much for the information that you shared today. I know that Oftentimes in the news, you hear about universities being in trouble because someone was not aware of an export control situation and they made a mistake. Oftentimes it's a mistake, and the university ends up bearing the brunt of that. So thank you so much for bringing forth this information for our faculty and staff today. It is great.
And I will share one thing, one thing that you all should be aware of. When it comes to export controls, if a violation occurs and it's not done maliciously, the government is they're forgiving, as long as you're forthcoming with your mistake. But it's once you start hiding things, or if you do it knowingly, then that's when you are actually held responsible. And if Prairie View, we didn't do what we were supposed to do, then that's when we're held responsible. But that is one thing things happen. We understand that. But it's once you start hiding it or doing things maliciously that it's now a problem. So we don't want you to think that if you do something and you're just automatically going to go to jail or get fined. So, but we do want you to be aware that of these things.
Bottom line, if there's any question, just contact the export controls officer for the university, who's Krista Mendez, and her contact information is there on the screen. Please, again, can you complete the brief survey and subscribe to PVAMU Research on our YouTube page so that you can get all of the videos when they are edited and posted, including this great one by Krista Mendez today. So thank you again for your time, and you'll get a reminder about the Wednesday presentation by the Office of Research Advancement on today. Thank you.
Karen.
Great day.